Hey guys, we're back updating the power rankings for Survivor 49 following episode 11, which was, again, a fine episode, all things considered, where even though the boot by the end of it was pretty clear, I feel like there was still some interesting stuff to be had with certain contenders, but we'll get that into enough. But we have 7 people to talk about, and let's waste more time. Let's go into the video. So starting off at number 7, we have the latest boot from the season, and here we have Sophie S, who was my winner pick coming to the season, but now here she is voted out at the final 7. And again, I feel like if we are going through the episode, Sophie's boot here was pretty clear, where she got some negativity early on with her trying to do damage control with Sage, only for that to be very ineffective. And from that point on, Sage just wanting revenge against Sophie for the rest of the episode. Even beyond that, they set up Steven as a super obvious boot until he won immunity. And it became pretty clear at that point that Sophie was probably going out here. Where yes, while you had Sophie B talking about the possibility of flipping, it didn't seem like she was going to go through with it, at least in this round. And it was ultimately culminate in Sophie being voted out unanimously at this tribal here, which is definitely an interesting outcome here. But if we're talking about Sophie more generally, she's someone who, again, I felt pretty good about coming into the season, where I literally had her as my winner pick. And while that died very quickly once the season started due to how bad her edit was, I still feel like she's someone that I ended up liking by the end of it, where it's sort of funny that I feel like the show didn't really care much for her, at least in the pre-merge, and I even got the sense that she probably wasn't like a massive favorite from production, but even so, I still kind of resonated with a lot of her takes on things. I find her like snack comment, the reward challenge very funny. I find a lot of her like views of the game to be very relatable, and just in general, I found Sophie to be pretty good. Now, in terms of her actual game, like she did spend a lot of the pre-merge on the bottom. It was pretty clear that she was at the bottom of the Hina power structure. But I think after the merge, she did turn up her game a bit to where she was able to at least like position herself to be like this middle figure, to where she was able to at least flip to take out Jawan, and was at least like having the idea to flip back and forth to take out Savannah the following round. And while by the end it was pretty clear that not many people trusted her and kind of saw right through her, I still kind of appreciate the fact that she was at least willing to play a somewhat dynamic game. And in a lot of ways, I do kind of relate to her due to how she approaches the game, to where even though she ended up like not being a contender once the season actually started, I still ended up enjoying her for the time that we got from her. But obviously she's now out of the game to where she's here at number 7. And before we continue, I am once again partnering up with Russell Muscle TV to promote Idle Plays. Idle Plays is an online shop where you can purchase Survivor puzzles and practice them so that you can be the next challenge beast on Survivor. And with Survivor 50 just around the corner, you can purchase relics from Survivor history with my Creator Camp package, which includes the Labyrinth puzzle, the Slide puzzle, and Spencer's 5-piece puzzle from Survivor Cambodia. If all that sounds exciting to you, feel free to click the link in my description and start shopping now. And with that, we have 6 people left in the game to talk about. As usual, I'll be ranking them based on how likely I think they are to win the game based on their edit and current game position. But at number 6, the person I believe is the least likely to win from this point on is still Christina. And Christina at least has a slight rebound here, where she's at least able to be part of the majority for this one vote to take out Sophie S, someone who she didn't seem to have the greatest relationship with. And I know Sophie expounded upon like her relationship with Christina in their exit interview. But regardless, I feel like this episode didn't move the needle for me when it comes to Christina, where she's still not in the greatest game spot to get towards the end. And even beyond that, her edit here is not the greatest in the world, where she spends a lot of the episode talking about wanting to target Savannah, where she talks about how like she would rather get Savannah out, despite there being the Sophie plan. You even have her admitting during Tribal that she and Savannah just don't really get along. But despite that, she doesn't even vote out Savannah, where she instead piles her vote onto Sophie here. Again, pretty clearly contradicting herself in the edit, which, again, I'm not saying it's the wrong game move for her to stick with the Sophie vote here, but the fact that she just talks so much about targeting Savannah and then just openly not getting her way here is not a great look for me from an edit perspective. And just in general, Christina's pretty clearly drawing dead at this point, but it's for that reason that I have her here at number 6. I'm moving on to number 5, and this is another person who I feel like this episode didn't do much to improve my view of them, but at number 5 we do have Sage. And Sage has a bit of a weird episode here, where she obviously ends up being very upset by the Jawan blindside, and she even talks at Tribal, talking about how Jawan meant a lot to her, considering that she's used to not having many friends, and how Jawan sort of filled that role. But it goes beyond that in the sense that she wants revenge against Sophie S for flipping against Jawan and not apologizing, which can be seen as an entertaining arc across this episode. But if we're talking about Sage as a winner contender, I don't think this is a particularly great look, where it's so clear that Sage is just driven by this petty need for revenge, to the point where she even says that she has wanted Savannah out for more of the game, how Savannah's probably the better target for her, but gosh darn it, Sophie S crossed her and she needs to address that right here, right now. Whereas I feel like if she were to be an actual winner, that there would be a bit more gravitas to her need for revenge, how her deciding to target Sophie would be a bit more rooted in long-term strategy. Then also like the fact that it just wraps up immediately where she just says she wants Sophie S gone, votes out Sophie S, and Sophie S is just gone already. Again, it just feels like this one-off thing. It doesn't feel like it's going to lead to anything. And I feel like at this point in the season, I feel like I just needed more from Sage. And the fact that we don't really get it, where, again, like, the extent to which you could say that this need for revenge is a benefit to Sage's story, the fact that it just wraps up immediately, like, doesn't give me much confidence that Sage is gonna go on to have, like, this winner trajectory. So it's for that reason I did decide to leave her around the same spot here at number 6. Now moving on to number 4, and I did think about this one a little bit, but after some deliberation, I actually decided to bump Rizzo down here to number 4, and I think this was a pretty questionable episode for Rizzo, all things considered, where he gets a pretty bad segment after the journey where we just see him acting so confident that Steven's advantage is a vote steal, and you even have him like talking through like how he came to that conclusion when it's pretty obvious that he's wrong. And we even see Steven responding, saying how he's glad that Rizzo thinks it's a vote steal, how he can use that to instill fear into others. And again, the fact that Rizzo just got all that content, like when it was pretty clearly like him being wrong, is not the greatest look there. He gets another pretty questionable moment during the scramble where he ends up figuring out that he needs to target Sophie S in order to take out a threat, but also to protect Savannah, which leads to this pretty funny confessional where he just messes up the saying, kill two birds with one stone, and they really let that linger for several seconds as he tries to figure out how to say it properly. And again, while it's possible that they just threw it in because they just couldn't resist that moment, I feel like if Rizzo were the winner this season, that they'd want to be presenting him as being more intentional in his deliberation there. So again, not really sure what to make of that. So I think there are some questionable things from a edit standpoint that made me question Rizzo's prospects. But I also think from a game standpoint, I think there are some worry signs as well. Like the fact that he wasn't even targeted at this tribal, where there had been constant talk the last few rounds about how they need to flush Rizzo's idol, how it would be beneficial to take out Rizzo. And yet all of a sudden in this episode, it feels like that is no longer a concern, where people are just no longer talking about Rizzo's idol or the need to flush it, which again could be seen as Rizzo managing his threat level better. But I think considering that this is happening immediately after he made this massive show of playing this fake idol and him talking about how it was meant to be this show for the jury, the fact that no one's talking about Rizzo as a threat or talking about wanting to flush Rizzo's idol in this episode could mean that he may not be as big of a jury threat as what it seemed at first, that maybe like this fake idol play probably harmed his win equity. So I do have to at least factor that in as a game element. But either way, I feel like this was a pretty questionable episode for Rizzo, all things considered, to where I did decide to drop him here to number 4. Now moving on to number 3, and this person has gone up mainly because Rizzo went down compared to last week. But at number 3, we do have Steven. And admittedly, I still don't think Steven is that likely to actually win. I think it's pretty clear at this point that he's a massive threat on the board, where he was the initial target coming into this round until he won immunity. Even beyond that, you had him going on this journey in a position to where no one really wanted him to go on the journey. The problem was that no one else wanted to go on the journey, which was kind of funny there. And unlike another person we'll be talking about, I feel like Steven's edit doesn't really support him like having like this underdog run where he's just going to win out from this point. Or yes, while he does get a lot of like good content during the journey, talking about how this proves that he can do anything, how he's kind of overcome his imposter syndrome. Again, it also feels circumstantial, like it feels like content he got because he just happened to be on the journey and was able to get this advantage there. So I'm not feeling that great about Steven's like underdog story to actually go on to win this season despite him being this massive threat. But with that said, he still ended up winning immunity in this spot. He's still someone who got this vote block that is likely going to play a major factor in this next tribal, considering that next tribal is the last time he could use it. And again, I'm expecting him to at least get through this next round through his advantage or potentially winning immunity. But in terms of him actually getting to the end, I feel like the fact that he's just been so much talked about as this big threat without really having like much backing for him to actually like have this underdog run within him makes me think that he's probably going to get cut right before the end, either at like Final 5 or Final 4. So not getting to the very end, but Again, he at least has like that aspect to him in terms of him being a threat where I would expect him to win a jury vote if he gets to the end. The problem is that I don't think he really has like much evidence to support him actually getting to the end based on what we've seen. So it's for that reason that I can't really have many higher than number three. Now moving on to number two, and I actually think this episode presented an interesting debate here in terms of actual placements here, as I do think there is an argument for this person to still be number one even at this episode, and I still think this person has a serious shot to win. However, I think this episode also presented some not great things that make me a bit more hesitant, especially compared to the number one person. So I'm actually going to drop Savannah here to number two this week. And I think a lot of that comes down to some not so great things from an in-game standpoint that made me a bit more worried about her. Or for one, she is once again being presented as a threat, sort of similar to Steven in the sense that she is being targeted in the game. And we see her being the secondary target coming into this tribal where there was this debate over whether the likes of Sophie B would flip on her. And we even see Sophie B talk about how she'll need to flip against Savannah and Rizzo at some point down the road. Even Sage has talked about the need to flip against Savannah, how she's seen Savannah as like this big threat for pretty much the entire game, and how like she's admittedly like wanted to target Savannah for more of the game compared to Sophie S, but was more so drawn by the need for revenge that motivated her to stick away from Savannah for this round. So again, the fact that Savannah is a pretty perpetual target in the game, like despite her like being part of the majority, is not a great sign there. And while I would have more confidence in her to get to the very end compared to Steven based off her edit and also like her alliance in the game, I think this episode also revealed that she may not have the most respect in the jury from the world. Like that whole interaction with Christina at Tribal where the two of them are just openly admitting to not getting along is not the greatest sign there. It makes me at least question a bit more whether Savannah would actually win a jury vote if she gets to the end. Where despite her being like a pretty big target on the board, it's not a guarantee that she's going to have like the respect to win a jury vote. So I think this episode made me question that thing a bit more. Also, the fact that there is like this prospect that Sophie B just outright flips against her as well, like where that was a setup storyline. So I do think there are some more worry signs there when it comes to Savannah compared to before, where I don't think it's a for sure thing that Savannah is going to get to the end in a winning position, as I thought in previous weeks. Though with that said, I still think this episode wasn't entirely bad for Savannah, where again, she does get her way. She talks about wanting to target Sophie S from early on, gets her way there. There's also a pretty interesting moment where Sage tells Sophie S that she just handed Savannah $1 million by voting out Jawan the last round, and the fact that that was subtitled makes me think that that could be relevant down the road. So it's not like Savannah is completely dead in this episode. I still think there are some positives that we have with her from this episode, and there's still a chance that she could rebound in this following episode, but I think there are enough worry signs for her from an in-game standpoint to where I couldn't fully justify her being number one after this week, but it was enough to have her here at number two. And now at number one, the person I believe is the most likely to win Survivor 49 at this point is Sophie B. Admittedly, I'm not feeling the most confident about this shift here, as I think a lot of it will come down to whether Sophie B will be successful in making this flip happen, where we do get a lot of content of her talking about wanting to flip against Rizzo and Savannah, how she'll need to do so if she wants to actually win at the end. And you even have her later in the episode talking about how she's in the middle and how like it would be a boss move for her to take out Savannah, but at the same time, like there's considerations for sticking with them for another round, including the fact that Steven has his advantage. She also mentions her knowledge is power, which, to be fair, like, I don't think she would be successful at taking Steven's advantage if she wanted to do so, considering Steven has to play before Tribal, which makes me think that maybe she could try to steal Rizzo's idol instead, or maybe just doesn't play at all. So I do think there are a lot of questions over, like, Sophie B's decision-making here, and I think there's also uncertainty over whether her flip against Rizzo and Savannah would even be that successful, as for all we know, like she could flip and she'll just become the biggest target on the board. So I'm still not entirely sure like what to make of Sophie B's episode here. And I do think there are still some warning signs that her flipping may not work out in the way that she intends. Though with that said, I think the reason I decided to go with her number one for this week at least is that I think I would probably have more faith in Sophie B to win a jury vote at this point compared to Savannah, where I feel like in this episode we got some worry signs for Savannah's jury prospects, like the Christina situation's not great. Even beyond that, like Savannah is being talked about as a target. Sophie B doesn't quite have those issues from an in-game standpoint. And while you could definitely qualm with like how like she was presented in the edit with her like decision to stick by her group for another round, I still think there's at least some promise that like it is setting up her making this big shift in the game and taking out this big threat in Savannah that would set her up well to win the game. So it's for that reason that I'm at least willing to give Sophie B another chance. And that mixing the fact that we got some red flags from Savannah's game position at this point, that was enough to have Sophie B a number one for this week at least. But I still think it is still pretty close between the two, as I think it could honestly go either way at this point. But for now, I think considering where we're currently at, I did decide to have Sophie B here at number one. And there we go, that'll do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe, really helps with the channel. Now I'll be back again next week once the season has started, where we'll be getting into these players and seeing just how wrong I am about all these people, so be on the lookout for that. And I'm also going to be covering a whole bunch of shows coming up, including The Amazing Race and Hell's Kitchen, so be on the lookout for that as well. I'm on Patreon and have YouTube memberships, so if you want to consider supporting the channel, you can do so by clicking the link in the description. And you can also join the Discord server by also clicking the link in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way, but for now, that is the video. See ya.